is Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey Dream Drivers, welcome to episode 71 of the Dreams and Drive podcast. And today we're going to be speaking with writer, author, and entrepreneur Jen Glantz. And this episode is all about how to not give up on yourself. And in this episode, Jen shares her story of how she was able to go to New York to pursue her dreams of being a writer and everything that happened along the way. And I think a lot of times as dream drivers, we may encounter obstacles, we may encounter people who don't believe in us. We may encounter rejection after rejection. And Jen's story really speaks to what you can do when that happens and how to keep going. So I hope that you guys enjoy. And one of the cool things about this episode is that you're going to get to hear Jen's inspiration behind her business, Bridesmaid for Hire. I was so amazed when Jen told me what spurred this business idea. I think it was really unique, and it just goes to show that if you have an idea, it can be profitable, so don't sleep on it. All right, so before we get into the episode, here are some key things I want you guys to do. If you have not followed us on social, at Dreams and Drive, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and we are on Snapchat. I'm thinking about probably doing some more on that. Make sure to follow us there. And if you want today's show notes, just go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 71. And make sure that you join our Dreams and Drive community. To do that, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. It's always a pleasure when you guys are also subscribed to our channel. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, on your TV. Hit the subscribe button so that you can get updates every week when we release a new episode. And if there is a part of this episode that you really like, please make sure to use the hashtag Dreams and Drive and share it on social. It's always fun to go in and see how you guys are engaging with the content each week, so make sure you do that. All right, so I hope that you guys enjoy. Let's get to the episode. Hi, Jen. Welcome to this episode of Dreams and Drive. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show today.
I know. I can't wait for our dream drivers to hear your story because I really think it's phenomenal, inspiring, and so inspirational to hear how this idea that you had has blossomed into this business and this life for you. So we definitely have to get into that later on. But something I love to start all our interviews out with is the question, what inspired you as a child, Jen? So if I had to say, who was Jen, the 7-year-old, the 8-year-old, what would you say?
I was bullied a little bit when I was in school when I was younger. I was always a very different girl. I was never part of any of the cliques. I went to a private school, and I never really had that many close friends. So I did a lot of things by myself. I read a lot of books. I played with my Barbies a lot and used my imagination to put them in these crazy situations. I wrote in journals a lot when I was younger. And I did a lot of, self-improvement and discovery at a very young age because I was so different, and I never really connected with a lot of people in my school when I was younger.
What kind of self-improvement and discovery were you doing at such a young age? Do you remember?
I think realizing very slowly that it was okay to be different. When I was not fitting in with the other kids, I never had a desire to blend in with them. I never had a desire to change who I was. I began realizing at an early age that it's okay to embrace being different and weird and awkward and just exactly who you are. And I think because of the way I was treated by others, it really made me want to treat people differently. And as I grew older, I always wanted to cling to the people who were different, get to know them, become their friend, and never leave them out.
You know what? I find that so interesting. I've done so many of these different podcast interviews, and I feel like there's certain themes that all, creative entrepreneurs kind of had. But this was the first time that you brought up the fact that you were bullied as a child, because I too was also bullied. It's actually so funny. I was bullied. I want to say it's maybe starting in 4th grade to 6th grade, about the size of my lips. Like all the kids would call me WB Frog and Lips. Like I had the nickname nickname Lips. That's what everyone called me. And it's funny because I feel like although I was bullied, it also helped me really have a strong sense of self. Because there's something, bullying can either make or break you, right? As you may know in your own life. And I think that bullying definitely defined my self-confidence, because although they may have called me Lips, they were still coming to me to ask me for homework help. You know what I meant? It was something where I realized that this was not a reflection of me. That was a reflection of that person's own idea of themselves. Do you know? So...
And I think that really applies to life now. I mean, sometimes when people come to us with criticism, or they come to us not really approving what we're doing or understanding it, we take that as, self-criticism, but really what they're coming to us with is fear and not fully understanding something that's different. And I faced that a lot in my professional career as I got older. And, it was something that I really had to take a step back and try to understand.
So let's talk about, transitioning to that professional life. What did you think when you were a child, or what was your dream as a child?
As a child, I wanted to be two things when I grew up. The first was a writer. I desperately loved books and I loved writing. And the other thing I really wanted to be was a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, wow, that's specific. That's very targeted.
Oh, my God. I loved the idea of being a teacher. I remember I would line up my Barbies and pretend that I was teaching them. And I just always had this passion for, meeting other people, strangers, and teaching them and helping them learn and grow. It just seemed so interesting to me at a young age.
That's really cool to hear. So you went to the University of Central Florida, right?
I did, in Orlando, Florida.
Did you grow up in Florida?
I did. I grew up in South Florida, and I lived there my whole life. And I went to school in Orlando, which was 3 hours away from my home. And then from there, I lived in California. I lived in New York. So it was only after college that I, really spread my wings and moved all over the place.
All right. So let's fast forward to college. What was your focus in college? What were you, once you graduated, what was the thing that you were trying to become?
So I majored in English poetry and journalism in college. And, it was really weird because when I was in college for those 4 years, I never really thought about what would happen when I graduated. I was so consumed with my majors, with my extracurricular activities. I never had a game plan for graduation. And I remember about a month before it was time to graduate and I had to make my first resume, I fell into a funk of depression and just uncertainty because for your whole life, you know what your next step is. And here you are at graduation, and I had no game plan. I honestly did not know what I wanted to do next. With those two types of majors in the English and journalism, there really wasn't that many choices back then. And the teachers I had, the mentors I had, were steering me in directions that I didn't even want to go down.
Like what?
I remember for journalism, I went to my teacher and I said, "Hey, what can I do next?" And he's like, "Well, you could write for a newspaper. That's really it." And I had no desire to do that. I could not write breaking news. I used way too many adjectives and metaphors. And, I went to my English teachers and was like, "Well, what do I do now?" And they were pretty much like, "Good luck. Try to do anything with an English degree because there's no true path." And I think it hit me very hard, very fast that last month of college, realizing that I was on my own to figure it out.
That's so true because I definitely know how you feel because you kind of don't give too much thought to it until you have to give thought to it, if that makes any sense. And then you're like, wait, I have 1 month left. What do I do? What happened? So what happened for you then? What was that? What was life after college like?
It was a complete shock. I remember the last day after I graduated, I packed up my car, my parents' car, with all of my belongings and moved back home to my parents' house and, lived in my childhood room. And I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what kind of jobs to even apply for. And I was pretty lost. And the first job I got out of college was actually a very interesting one. I was in a sorority in college, and I got offered the job of working for that sorority. And with that job came traveling. So every week I would travel to a new college and work with sorority women, help them with leadership development, give them workshops, do mentoring for them. And that became my job for a full year, was being a traveling consultant for this sorority.
So did you, throughout that year, did you ever have that moment where you're like, okay, maybe this could be my life? Or was there always an inkling and the desire to do more, to do something different?
Well, I definitely knew it was temporary. That's the kind of job where you can only have it for a year or 2 years max because you're traveling, you're living out of a suitcase, and it's a very tough job because you're mentoring and trying to empower women who are around the same age as you and kind of don't want to listen to you because of that. So it was a very hard job. And I remember, as the year went by, I said, okay, I'm buying a little bit of time. I still don't know what I'm going to do next, but right now I'm going to enjoy this job. And when it ended, the year ended, I packed my suitcases up and I moved right back home to my parents' house again for the second time. And there I was, really unsure what to do next. I figured since I didn't know what to do, I would do anything. And I remember sitting on my childhood bed and I would apply for 50 jobs a night. And I'm talking about any jobs wow. I wasn't qualified for, jobs I didn't want. I just would apply for anything available because when you don't know what you want to do, you should just do something. And that was my motto then.
So how did that work out for you?
Terribly. I was applying for everything from being, an administrative assistant to trying to be the person who, clothes mannequin at Forever 21. I thought it would be so much fun to get to figure out the outfits that the mannequins wear. And I got nothing. I was applying for all these jobs, but my resume basically I was unqualified for a lot of them. And there was a magazine that I used to read when I was home in Florida. It was a local magazine, and I really admired the publisher's writing. So I took a chance. I emailed her. I asked if I could just come in and say hello. And I walked into her office and I begged her for a part-time job. And she gave me the chance of working for her at that magazine. And that was, my second job out of college was working as her assistant at this local magazine.
Do you remember what you said to her? Because you said you begged her. So were you like, hey, I need this job? Or did you kind of more convince her that you were the one to help her?
I think I would, say that I tried to play it cool, but realistically, I probably went in there very nervous and said, listen, I have loved your writing for years. And, I would love the chance to learn from you. And I probably said to her, like, I'll do this for free. I was probably so desperate. I was 22 years old. I just wanted a job and probably said I'll do it for free. And I think she gave me the opportunity at first to work part-time for a couple dollars an hour. And then it turned into full-time for a little while. It was by no means the job of my dreams. It actually turned out to be probably one of the worst jobs I've ever had. I thought this woman would be my mentor and really, be supportive of me and my writing career. And she, really put me down. I was her assistant and my job was to clean up her dog's poop every day. Yeah.
Was her dog in the office?
It was.
Okay.
My job was to follow it around and clean up after it. And my other job was to go to her house and hang up Christmas decorations. And I was doing everything but writing. And when I went to her and said, can I please write anything? She said, no, you're not a good writer. I don't think you're ever going to have a career writing. So I'm not going to help you with that. So she took my, naive spirit and my begging as a sign of, I'll do anything for her. And in turn, it really wasn't the opportunity that I deserved or I wanted.
So over the next few years, what was, how did you get out of that position and really start building a personal brand for yourself?
I think after, during that job, I hit my personal rock bottom in the sense that I was miserable. I was living at home. I didn't really have a social life. I wasn't making a lot of money. And I was working a job where every morning I would drive there so nervous about what I was going to get yelled at about that day. And I think that I had to hit that emotional rock bottom of just being like, I can't live this life anymore. I'm 22 years old. This is not what I deserve. So I kept applying for jobs. While I was at work, I would apply for every job in the world, in New York and LA, anywhere. And I finally managed to book a flight to New York. It was a week-long trip, stayed at my friend's apartment on her couch, and I went on as many job interviews as I could. And I snagged a job in PR. So that was my ticket out of Florida to New York, was getting a job at a tiny PR firm. And that's what made me move to New York, was just this sign of something different. I didn't move to New York because I thought that I'd become famous or that I would, have this amazing life. life. I moved because I had to get out of a really bad situation. And I found something here that would save me from that.
So let's put a timestamp on this just for people listening in. What year did you move to New York?
I moved to New York in, I want to say, 2012.
Okay. All right. So the year 2012, what was your biggest challenge that first year living in New York and finding yourself in the big city?
I think my biggest challenge was taking it all in. It was very scary at first. You know, New York City is not anything like where I'm from in Florida. And a lot of it was just adapting to the strange ways of New York, whether that's dealing with the strange people you meet and, you know, making sure you feel safe wherever you're going, being street smart. I think it was really the year of growing up. I came from living at my parents' house to now living on my own in New York and just dealing with the loud sounds and the loud people and really having to be tough. I think I changed a lot as a person that year. I grew up a lot, and I think that I became, a little bit stronger with my personality.
You know, it's funny. I have a friend that we met when we were 18 because we were both in the same media program. And she visited New York for her first time. And she lived in Orlando, actually. And I remember that weekend that she was in New York, she was just so amazed. But at the same time, she was horrified. It was one of those things that somebody, because, you know, I'm from New Jersey. My family lives in New York. So, like, New York is basically a 20-minute train ride for me. So I never realized how different the way of life in this area is in comparison to other parts of the country, and how it's really can be shocking, and it really does take some getting used to if you've never experienced it before.
It does. And you know what? I loved that change. I really embraced it. I found myself loving walking around, New York on the street, having no purpose. I would spend weekends just waking up and walking miles around the city and having no game plan, but then meeting random people and having conversations and stumbling upon a crazy cool event. And there was just always something going on. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel so alone. I was here working a job I didn't love. Again, I had another pretty crazy boss here. But I was in a setting and a surrounding that I felt kind of empowered. I felt like this was the place that I could be and try new things. And, I don't think there's magic in New York City. I think that can just kind of be a stigma or something that's not really true. But I do think there's something about being surrounded by so many people who are, loud and crazy and obnoxious that makes you come out of your shell a little bit more and be a little bit more fearless.
I always say to people, like, whenever I go to New York, I just feel like there's an energy that inspires something around you. You know what I mean? New York definitely has that, not magic, but some kind of energy that can really alter your mood in some type of way.
I agree. And I really think that energy is just that people are moving so fast, literally. You have to keep up when you're here or else you'll just get pushed and shoved and stomped all over. And because everybody here is moving so fast, I think that encourages people to do a ton more than they think that they can handle. Everyone here is juggling a ton. It's expensive to live here. We're all doing a million things to pay the bills. And I think because of that rush, that energy, that knowing that maybe living here is not forever, it's temporary, it does make you wake up in the morning and really see how you can push your own boundaries.
Definitely. So during this time, the 2012, 2013 time period, how were you building your brand as a writer? Because you still, wanted to pursue that, right?
Oh, definitely. When I had that bad boss in Florida and she said I wasn't going to be a writer, I was the kind of person that when someone told me no or they didn't believe in me, I went to prove them wrong. So, I was working this bad job. I was not enjoying going to work every day, and that made me start a blog. So on the side, I started my blog in 2011, I think, called The Things I Learned From. And I decided to start a blog where I would write posts from conversations I had with people, mistakes I made, trying to find a job, trying to date. I just wrote the truth about my life on this blog, and that was my home for my writing when nobody else would give me the opportunity. So I carried that blog with me when I moved to New York, and that was what really launched my writing career, was just writing for myself at first. I didn't have many readers, but it gave me a personal home and outlet for my stories. And then once I moved to New York, I had these big goals and dreams of getting published on these websites. And I would apply every single week. I would send them my writing, and every week I'd get a rejection, or I wouldn't get something or any answer from them. It took me about, 2 years to really get published on some of these sites that I dreamed of being on. And it took 2 years of me just not giving up on my writing and, me writing for myself. And it was a lot of hard work, but I'll never forget the moments when those sites published me. And, from there, I kept on making new goals for myself, and I held myself accountable to them.
How were you keeping track of your goals and holding yourself accountable to your goals?
A lot of it was just a mental process saying, I really want to achieve this. And a lot of that was making sure every single week I was doing something to make that happen, whether it was keeping up with my blog, publishing a new post, no matter how busy my life was, or reaching out to people at that publication, asking them again and again, will you publish me? What can I do to change my writing so that you will publish me? A lot of it was just not giving up on myself. And even when I was hearing no and I was hearing nothing, it still was a fire inside of me to push on and press on, because I knew that eventually it could happen.
So around this time, you were getting invited to a lot of weddings, right? A lot of your friends. So tell us about that and what led you to that epiphany, that aha moment.
I had all of my friends get engaged and married at a very young age. So when they were all getting engaged and married, I was asked to be always the bridesmaid for them. And I was a bridesmaid for my friends, almost a half a dozen times. There was one night in particular. Yeah, it was a lot. And there was one night in particular where two rather distant friends who I wasn't super close with, they both asked me to be a bridesmaid on the same night. And I came home, I told my roommate, I said, Carrie, these two people asked me, and she said to me, I think you've become a professional bridesmaid. And that sentence is what completely changed my life, because when she said that, I had this idea in my head that perhaps there are strangers out there in the world who need some support, who need a female support system to step in and be there for them on their big day. So why not try to do this for strangers? I know it sounded weird and crazy, but I figured it was worth a try.
So how did you validate this idea? Like, how did you figure out this could be an actual viable business?
Well, I knew it was a crazy idea, so I knew if I told my friends, my family, or posted it on Facebook that people would call me insane. So I decided to take a crazy idea and test it out in a crazy place. So I went to Craigslist.com. I posted an ad there offering my services as a bridesmaid for hire. I wrote the ad anonymously on a Friday night, and I shut my computer. I went to sleep. I had a great weekend. And then Monday morning, I started getting a lot of emails from brides all over the world who were interested in hiring me.
That is crazy. And you had no idea, or you had no expectation that was going to happen, right?
I didn't. It was just an idea that I had, and I didn't know that it was going to work. I didn't know necessarily that other people felt that this would work or that they needed something like this. But I didn't spend too much time trying to validate that or trying to test that. I figured that the ad would speak for itself. I would read through responses. I would see what the world needed and wanted, and maybe it would work. I honestly didn't think it would blow up. I didn't think that many people would even see it. So the fact that they did, and the fact that a lot of people were attracted to it, made me realize, wow, there is something interesting here.
What was the biggest problem that you were seeing a lot of the brides were coming to you with?
A lot of them came to me because they just needed someone to speak to vent to listen to them. I think that when you are, planning a wedding, going through that adventure, a lot of times you just need a pair of ears to listen to you, because you have so many emotions and thoughts and problems, and your friends are great. That's definitely what they're there for. But sometimes they're busy, or sometimes they don't know how to address your wedding needs.
All right, so you had this idea, you put it on Craigslist, you got responses. Then what's next? Or then what happened?
So after that, I decided to make it a real business. I read through the emails and I made packages based on the needs that I found in those emails. And I started writing back to them. And eventually I found my first bride that I wanted to work with. Her name was Ashley and she lived in Minnesota. And I chose her because she wrote this email to me talking about how she fired her maid of honor because her maid of honor just wasn't supporting her and wasn't being there for her. And her wedding was 2 months away and she needed a female support system to step in and help her out.
So what did you end up doing for her? Like, were you doing consultations before? Did you have to go out to Minnesota to meet her? What did that look like?
So for Ashley, we talked on the phone a lot before. We had many phone calls where I helped her out. I helped her organize her thoughts, her problems, her challenges, her to-do list. And then I did fly to Minnesota. I went to Minnesota and was there for her on her wedding day. I stayed at her house the night before. I was the first person she saw when she woke up. And I really just walked her through the whole wedding day, held her hand, and made sure that she felt comfortable and stress-free.
Wow. And were you still working full-time at the PR job?
I was working full-time. I had transitioned to a new job at a tech startup, and I was a copywriter at a tech startup, and I absolutely loved my job. It was so amazing, and I loved it so much that I was terrified that this new job I started on the side would really interfere with that and I would get fired. So I really tried to separate them, and I really made it a point to not let my side hustle cross into my full-time job. So I kept things secret, and I didn't take off work very much, but I really loved the job and I wanted to try to do both.
So how did that work out? Were you able to continue doing both?
It was really hard. I like to say that I felt I was living a double life because I can
imagine.
Yeah, I was working like these 2 full-time jobs at once, and I'm the kind of person who functions really well under chaos and stress. So I really loved having a lot going on. And it was great. I did it for a year and a half. And then in late 2015, my startup started laying people off. And I was one of the people who was part of that layoff. So it was a little bit of a blessing in disguise because I loved the job so much. I'm not sure if I ever would have left. But in the back of my head, I knew that eventually I had to move on and do my own thing.
You know what's funny? By the time this episode airs, the episode that I'm going to reference will be up already. But I had a guest come on the show when we did her episode, and she had this dream job. She's working there for 3 months. And then a week after we did the interview, she texted me, and she's like, Raina, we have to do the interview over. I got fired. And literally the whole interview was about how much she loved this job. And, it's just so funny how things happen, right? And like, you can have that dream job and like it gets taken away and you have to do something else. So it's really good that you at least had something that you were doing on the side, right?
I agree. It was such a blessing in disguise that I did have something else going on, but I was always that person who really was loyal to any job that I was working. And I was a little bit heartbroken when I was laid off. I really loved my job. And I remember after my boss told me that he had to let me go, I hugged him goodbye, I packed up my stuff, and I walked out that front door, and I looked back at the building and said, I never want to work for somebody else again, because it was just so heartbreaking to work so hard and then have to go through a layoff like that. And I find that when we work really hard at jobs for other people, we never get the praise that we deserve, and it's not fair. And I really wanted to give it a shot of creating my own opportunity.
So do you think that was the moment that entrepreneurial fire was lit inside you? Because I feel like before, from what you said, it seemed like you kind of were okay with doing, having the full-time job and then having your side hustle. But was this the moment where you really just said, okay, let's do it?
My mom really put it the best way. I called her right after that happened, and I was hysterically crying. And I remember I was walking home to my apartment a couple blocks away, and I told her what happened, and she said, you know what? You were hanging off of a cliff. You were dangling, and you needed someone to push you off, and this was your push. And I think that when you have someone who pushes you, it's just like I had to leave Florida because I was in a bad situation, and just like this job that laid me off, it pushes you to make changes. And sometimes when you don't have that push in your life, you get really used to being comfortable and content with your situation, even if it's not the best. I was definitely overworked. I was definitely focused on way too many things back then. So in a way, it was the push that really made me say to myself, okay, we're going to definitely give this a shot. I'm honestly not sure if I had that courage myself to do that if this didn't happen.
So what did hustle mode look like for Bridesmaid for Hire in the next few months following your layoff?
It was tough. I remember I came home after that layoff and I wrote a Word document on my computer of all of the things I wanted to do. And, I realized that I had bills to pay, so it wouldn't be enough to just have this business as my only thing. And I had to be really creative with different modes of income, whether that was freelance writing, teaching classes, doing speaking engagements. I had to figure out multiple streams of income if I wanted to make this work. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't mention that, but I think that it's something that we need to talk about a little bit more, because if you are starting your own business and you're, working hard on that, you still have bills to pay. And in my case, they were piling up. So I had to take on a lot of other opportunities. And even today, even now, still, I have multiple streams of income every month just to pay my bills and make everything work.
And you live in New York City, so.
Oh my God, of course. I make it way harder on myself than I need to, which I also enjoy. I really enjoy making life tough for myself. It keeps things interesting.
Just move to Jersey.
No, I save so much in taxes.
That's so true. So what were some of the multiple streams of revenue or income that you created for yourself during this time?
I started pitching different, magazines, online websites, asking if I could write for them. Writing was always my passion. It was what I was doing for work for the past couple of years. So I began writing for a handful of websites every month pretty steadily and was getting paid for it. I began teaching classes. There were a lot of skills that I had learned starting a business and, a lot of skills I had learned doing PR and all of that stuff. So I began teaching classes at different schools around the city, and that became another stream of income. Writing a book was another stream of income. Doing different speaking engagements and workshops at big companies, that was another stream. So it just started becoming more and more and more. And what I liked about these different streams was I can control how much I wanted to do of each. So I was in control of when I wanted to work, who I wanted to do projects for, and even how much money I wanted to make that month. I set goals for myself, and every month I tried to reach that goal of making, a certain amount a month. And didn't always happen. There were some months I was very short, and there were some months I went over. So it was a great personal challenge to really just see, how I wanted to structure my time.
Were there any tools or resources that really helped you during this time?
I would say just keeping organized. I'm a very simple person. I don't have a million apps on my phone, and I like technology, but I also kind of hate it. So I'm very simple, and I used Google Docs. I have a spreadsheet that has different tabs on it. One of the tabs is my income for every month. The other one is my assignments for the week, and I organize my life on Google Docs.
You know what? I love Google Docs. I swear, it's the savior. Like, Google is God.
It is. It really is. And I mean, it's such a simple tool, and I absolutely adore it.
Definitely. One of the things that, as I was, reading up about you, I think in an article, I'm not sure, you mentioned that you use Score, right? Score.org, and you got a mentor through Score. And actually in episode 4, Mahisha Dellinger, who's the CEO of a company called Curls, she mentioned that Score and getting a mentor through them was pivotal to her business. So tell me about your Score mentor and what you learned from him.
I had a very interesting experience with my Score mentor. I was matched with a man who was 86 years old, and he was, the polar opposite of everything I was. And, every business he ever had was very different than any business I have. But for some reason, that opposite really was important for our relationship. I finally had somebody who was giving me advice and guidance that I wasn't getting anywhere else. And I really do abuse Score. You're supposed to go maybe once or a couple times. I go every single week. And
oh my God.
And we've become really good friends. It's been 2 years now, and he's someone that I really trust and go to for the honest truth. He doesn't BS, and he doesn't, sit there and listen to my excuses. If I try to give him an excuse, he snaps me right out of it, and I really appreciate that.
So what's the biggest excuse that he has to snap you out of?
I think that I go there and I give excuses as to why I'm not ready and not good enough for something. I remember when I was writing my book, I went to him and I said, I can't do this. I'm not ready. I have all these fears and, I'm trying to write this chapter and it's going nowhere. And he looked at me and he said, you have to write out of order. Just because it's chapter 1 doesn't mean it has to be done today. You can write whatever you feel like writing, and you are ready for this. You are good enough for this. And I don't know why, but at that moment, it was the most genius advice he's ever given me, that I could write a book out of order, because I thought that I had to, sit there and really pine over chapters. And maybe I wasn't ready to write that at that moment, but maybe there was something I was ready to write. And I really do owe him that, because if he didn't give me that advice, I think I'd still be stuck on chapter 1.
And something else I read that he gave you was helping you monetize your advice giving, right? Not doing everything for free.
He did. A big thing of what he wanted to teach me was that, you're worth more than you think you are. So we always practice negotiating with each other. And, I'll try to go in there and be like, okay, I'll do it for this amount. And he tries to make me realize my self-value and my worth, and that I deserve more and need to ask for more. And I think that's something that all women especially need to realize, is that you're worth more than you realize. And you really need to figure out, how much you're going to charge for a service or a product that you're launching, and up that price a little bit more, because sometimes you're jaded when it comes to figuring out how much you should charge people for things.
Definitely. And I definitely feel as women, sometimes it can just be scary figuring out your prices. And even as new entrepreneurs, sometimes you just don't know where to start, right? So it's really good to hear that it's something that you had to practice and get better at over time.
Oh, no, I definitely agree with that. I think it's one of the hardest things to figure out. And it just is something that you really have to learn with trial and error.
So I want to ask you this, because I was just so impressed. For anyone who Googles Bridesmaid for Hire, you got so much press so you launched in 2014, right? What was your key to getting the word out? Because it says on your site you were featured in over 500 outlets. Is that the right word? Right amount, I should say.
Yeah. So, it was so crazy. I got that job in PR, and I moved to New York, and I hated the job. I hated PR, but it actually taught me a lot of incredible lessons that I use now for myself. And a lot of those is just to be really determined. Sometimes when you're sending emails to people, they don't read it the first time, or even the second time, or the third time it's buried so far down in their inbox. So one of the secrets to successful PR is just really reaching out to people again and again until you get an answer for them, and realizing that you're not annoying people. You're just making sure that they saw what you're putting out there. And a lot of the success I've had was because I emailed a person, anywhere between 8 and 15 times before I got
8 to 15?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, a lot of the times that they weren't getting back to me, not because they were ignoring me, but because people get so many emails a day that they don't always see yours, or they do, but they forget to write back. So by the 8th reminder, people were saying, oh my God, thank you for reaching out. I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you sooner. Very few people were like, please stop emailing me. You're annoying me. So it taught me the lesson that when you're doing PR and you're reaching out through email, a lot of what you have to do is just be super persistent.
And I think also, I know at least for your pitch to Dreams and Drive, I feel like it was very targeted, and you told your story in the email. And a lot of times I get a lot of pitches for Dreams and Drive, and sometimes I feel bad. Like I try to respond to people, but sometimes if it's just a very horribly worded pitch or just not relevant, I just delete it. Sometimes I know that's horrible to say, but I think yours were also very specific. You put in something personal. You told your story. You made it very easy for me to see how you would be of benefit to the Dream Driver audience. So what advice would you have to someone in figuring out how to tell your story via email when you're pitching these journalists?
The best thing you can do is remember that the person on the other end of your email is a human being. So talk to them like they are. Instead of writing press releases and talking like a robot, have a conversation with them via email. Use words you would use in natural conversation. Be fun, be humorous, use personality. All of those things will really, really, really make the person reading your email enjoy it. I think it's important to remember that none of us really love reading emails, but we do it because you never know what's inside. So if you can make your email interesting and stand out, you have a really good chance that someone's going to write back.
Yeah, and you got results, girl. You really did.
Thank you. And I mean, none of it was easy. I have to tell you, it's a headache. It takes hours, weeks, months, years before I got some of these big media placements. And a lot of that was just, eager persistence. And, it does take a lot to get it done. It is not easy.
Did you have anyone on your team with you, or were you kind of just doing all of this yourself?
I did it 100% myself, and it was something that I spent so long on doing myself, and it's definitely a lot for one person to take on, but I did like the challenge of it. It kept me on my toes.
All right, so let's talk about your book. Yes. When was the moment that you knew that you wanted to write a book?
I think that I was 6 years old, which might sound crazy because you don't really know much when you're 6.
Like, what is a book?
Right. I just had this fascination with books. I used to go to the library all of the time and check out the max amount of books a person was allowed to. And I always had a fascination for reading and writing. And I remember being 6 years old and I had like a bucket full of these, all my writing. Like I would write poems with crayons and I just wrote so much. And I knew very early on that I would like to one day write a book. I just knew that that was a dream of mine. And, it's such a wild dream to have because publishing a book is one of the hardest, things to do in your career. It's definitely not easy. And there were many times that when I tried to publish a book and, you're hitting constant roadblocks that I should have given up. I should never have gotten to where I am now because there were so many people telling me that I couldn't. And there were so many moments when I thought that I would never. So that's why it feels like an amazing accomplishment to me, just because it's something I've wanted for my whole entire life, and I never really thought that it could happen.
So can you give us the Cliff Notes version of your whole book process? And I'm going to link to the show notes for you guys listening in to Jen's video that I recently watched that will definitely move you. But yeah, give us the Cliff Notes version of that whole book process, dealing with rejection, dealing with publishers, the moment when you got the book in your hands for the first time.
Sure. So, my first moment of rejection came at age 14 when I wanted to write for my high school's newspaper. And the the teacher at the time sat me down and said that he wasn't going to let me write for the newspaper because I wasn't a good writer. And I remember thinking back then, maybe I should give up on this. Maybe writing is not for me, but I didn't. And I kept on writing. And, I wrote a book in 2013. It was just an ebook. It was kind of self-published. But after that, I tried to write another book and I pitched it to traditional publishers and I was rejected 40 times and I gave up on it. And it was one of the biggest regrets I've ever had. And one of the reasons why I was rejected, it wasn't because of my writing. It was because I didn't have a big platform. I didn't have 10,000 Twitter followers.
Wow.
And that was why I was rejected, which was such a difficult thing to comprehend because I thought that, as a writer, you should just be a good writer. But in publishing, sometimes in nonfiction, you also have to have a major platform. And it was a really tough time realizing that and getting those rejections. And, then it took me about a year to put together the book proposal for Always a Bridesmaid for Hire. And after that was done, my agent began shopping it to publishers. And the process is interesting. She gives all the publishers a deadline. So everyone has to give her a response by a certain date. So what happens is you start getting rejections first. And I think I got about, 27 rejections. And when you get rejections, they come one by one via email, and they always have a reason as to why you're getting rejected. So imagine getting, 27 rejection emails. It's a punch in the gut. And I just remember really being upset and calling my mom and telling her that this is never going to happen. And I need to give up on this crazy dream. And, it's killing me slowly. And she said to me, it's okay that people are rejecting you because in the end, it only takes one. And that was, a really big moment that kept me going, was just this hope that, everyone in the world could say no, but I only need one person to say yes. And, that deadline day finally came, and there were 3 outstanding publishers who didn't give an answer yet. And, they have to give an answer by noon, and 11:45, I get one yes, and then I get another yes, and then third yes. And, it was the craziest moment, I think, of my life. I was working at my job at that time. I walked outside of the building and pretty much collapsed because I couldn't believe it. This was a dream of mine since I was 6. And God, there were so many, milestones of when I should have given up. Anybody else probably would have given up because it's a painful process to go through to see your dream be, sliced up like this. And, finally flash forward after writing the book and editing it and all that jazz, getting it mailed to you, the final copy. copy, and being able to look at it and hold it and know that, strangers around the world will read it and hopefully they'll learn a lesson from it that'll change their life is just one of the most incredible feelings. And the 6-year-old version of myself wouldn't even be able to understand this feeling, but I'm sure she'd be proud.
What's the biggest lesson you think you've learned throughout that whole process?
That even when everyone's giving up on you, and they will, every single person will give up on you, you cannot give up on yourself. You can't. I think if you do, then it's all over. And I think when you want to, you need to realize that you're just a couple steps away from that yes. It's true. The second you feel like it's all over and you're done, you're probably closer than you think. And, I'm really proud that I never gave up on myself, even though there were times when I just wanted to stop doing this because it was really hard. And I think that's, a really tough lesson to learn.
Do you practice any self-care rituals or anything that really just makes sure you're in the right headspace? Because I definitely think the ability to not give up on yourself requires a lot of self-confidence and requires a lot of internal grit. And there are some people who may not know how to keep that alive in oneself. So how did you make sure to always keep that confidence and that idea of not giving up alive?
I think it was that I always wanted to prove these people wrong. I mean, there were many instances in my life where people really did put me down. And I think the fire that drives me is just this desire to prove people wrong. And, eventually you grow out of that and then you try to prove yourself wrong. There's a part of you who thinks maybe this won't happen. Maybe this is too big of a dream. And then it becomes a self battle of let me prove you wrong, Jen. So I think that's my fire is just trying to tell myself that it's not worth believing other people when they put you down, and instead it's worth trying to just prove everybody wrong.
Wow, that's some great advice. And looking back at that whole book publishing process, because there might be people listening in who also want to publish their own books, do you have any advice for that person who may have been who may be in your shoes or the shoes you were in a few years ago?
I would say that it's a very long process. Publishing a book is not something that'll happen in a couple months or a year. It takes years. And a lot of what happens in those years are, really crazy things that are going to try to stop it from happening. Lots of rejection. Always have a backup plan. It's really important that you believe in your work and you really just keep on fighting forward and just realize it's not an easy process. It might look glamorous and fun, but behind every single book you see on the shelf is many years of blood, sweat, and tears and heartbreak. And, hopefully that makes people appreciate the whole publishing industry and the authors a little bit more, because nobody got a book deal very easily and no book was published very easily. There's a lot of work that went into it.
I always wonder that, you go into Barnes and Nobles, and I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I'm like, wow, there's an author who wrote each book in this entire bookstore. People are writing books all the time. There's a whole engine. I just sometimes am so amazed by the things that we don't think about sometimes. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I mean, but it's just a fascinating thing. And I was haunted by Barnes & Noble. I would go there, and it's my ritual. I go there every so often, and I stand in the middle of the store, and I cry because it was just such a dream of mine to always, get a book published. And, when I would go to Barnes & Noble and see everybody else getting that done, I would just stand there and just be so upset and tell myself that one day it will happen. I have to believe it will. And, whenever I felt like giving up, I would walk on over to Barnes & Noble and just see all the other books. And, it's going to be such a proud moment of my life to go there on February 7th, open up the doors and see my book there. I just think I hope it's a testament to people to just not give up, because your wildest dreams can come true. It just might take, 20 something years to happen.
Definitely. So what's the dream now, Jen? What's next on your checklist or your to-do list?
I really want to be able to pass on a lot of the lessons I've learned to other people, especially women who are trying to start something for themselves. I think it's so incredibly empowering for, someone to say, I want to start my own opportunity. I want to make a living for myself. And I really hope to be able to spread my knowledge with other people and empower them to do something crazy for themselves. And, I hope to write more books. I hope to meet more strangers in this world. And, I just hope to change people's lives with the stories I've lived through.
And thinking about, your business and your entrepreneurial ventures, what do you think is the best business advice that you've received or you've learned over the years?
I would say that it's to aim for failure. You should try actively to fail, because when you do that, you push yourself out of your comfort zone and you honestly don't know what's going to happen. You might say, okay, I'm going to try to do something today that I don't know if it's going to work, or I don't know if I'm going to get a response, and you do it and you never know what's going to come from it. So if you fail forward, you fail fast, wonderful things could happen.
So let's go into our lightning round, Jen. At this point in the interview, I'm going to give you a prompt, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind. And remember, this is going to go with our whole dreams and drive metaphor, okay?
Sure.
The first word is park.
Bench.
Reverse.
Swimming.
Neutral.
Awesome.
Drive.
Never give up.
Yay, thank you. It's always so fun to do this part of the interview because I feel like you get so many different answers and everyone's brain is different. So I love doing that. You know, if you want to be a dream driver, though, you have to have your keys to success. So Jen, tell me 3 things that you think every dream driver needs in their toolkit before they hit the road.
I think a good night's sleep. Make sure that you really hit the pillow early on and you really get those hours. Don't wake up and check your email at 3 a.m. Nothing good ever comes from it. The other thing is an outlet to release stress, whether it's playing music or going to the gym, making sure that you're doing something a couple times a week to really take care of yourself and your mind and your body. And finally, just the confidence inside of you to know that you have everything you need to make it work. You are smart enough, you are ready enough, you are perfect enough to do it now. So don't give up on yourself and make sure you just start. That's the hardest part of starting.
Thank you, Jen. And can you tell our dream drivers where they can find you online?
Of course. You can find me on social media at Jen Glantz. You can find me at jenglantz.com or bridesmaidforhire.com. And you could pick up my new book, Always a Bridesmaid for Hire. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places that you want to read books.
Thank you, Jen. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I know our dream drivers as well have learned so much from hearing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
All right, so that's a wrap for episode 71 with Jen. I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing her dream driving story as well as her keys to success. And if you want today's show notes, just go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 71, and you can view all the resources that we talk about in the episode and also the tweetables that you want to probably go out and share on social. And talking about social, make sure you are following us at Dreams and Drive across the board. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. Follow us. We'll follow you back. Engage. Use the hashtag Dreams and Drive. And if you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to our Dreams and Drive channel. It's always good to know that you guys can get the updates whenever we have a new episode. One more thing that I also want to ask is if you ever have any suggestions or things that you think will make the podcast better, if you ever just want to drop me a note, you can always do so anytime. Just email me, Raina at dreamsanddrive.com. So that's RANA at dreamsanddrive.com. I'm just so grateful and appreciative of how much growth we've had over this past year. I couldn't have done it without you loyal Dreams and Drive listeners. I hope to continue to be able to give you guys good content every week, and it means so much to me when I hear from you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep dreaming, keep driving. And if you haven't listened to episode 70 with Christia Donaldson, where we talk about how to become a master problem solver and grow your brand, make sure you do that. Talk to you guys soon.